Hello there, and welcome back to Interesting Stuff. It's the almost daily homeschool educational supplement where we look at interesting topics that other people would not touch with their English barge pole, but we will dive in. And today we are looking at the Trans-Siberian Railway. Now, built by hand through one of the harshest environments on Earth, the Trans-Siberian Railway stretches 9,258 kilometers from Moscow all the way to Vladivostok. And you want to get your maps out and you want to check where that is. So do that now. Right. Work on the line began when Russia was still under the rule of the Tsars. The capital of Alexander III's disjointed empire lay in the west, separated from the eastern border by desolate snow forests. The only way to cross was by wagon or along waterways that turned to ice during the winter. Russia's eastern ports froze over when the snow hit, and messages sent by telegram regularly went missing. So you can see, it was difficult to govern that huge part of the planet. And, they needed transportation networks to increase the flow of information and people, and generally for a better quality of life. So following in the footsteps of North America, Minister of Transport Count Sergei White suggested a Trans-Siberian Railway could do for Siberia what the first transcontinental railroad did for the Wild West, and that was taking people from the east coast of America across to the other side. However, the line would need to cover almost 3 times that distance. And Russia didn't have America's resources. They lacked the money, the workforce, and the experience. What's more, the tracks would have to pass through some of the roughest terrain in the world. The railway would sit on permafrost, frozen for months at a time, and liable to melt during summer. The tracks would cross rivers, travel around the world's largest freshwater lake, and slice through mountains. Now, if they managed to pull it off, the rewards could be huge. The population of Siberia was thin and industry underdeveloped, but this inaccessible landscape, blanketed in snow for much of the year, contained most of Russia's resources. Siberia hides oil and coal and gas and diamonds, and the Ural Mountains have magnetite, bauxite, gold, platinum, and other important resources. Better transport links would promise to make the country millions. Russia's poor would have access to new jobs. New markets would open up with Japan, China, and Korea, and exports could travel easily from Asia to Europe. Russia could become the gateway to the East. So Russia poured the equivalent of $50 million into the project. And remember, we're going back well over 100 years. Financing the new railway with loans and taxes. They made a deal with China, agreeing to extend the railway line into Manchuria, and they printed more money, risking the financial security of the entire empire. The Tsar wanted the project finished within 10 years. But the climate and the landscape made work during the winter months almost impossible. And adding to that, gathering the men to build the track was challenging. Even with the promise of free accommodation, people were reluctant to move to Siberia from Russia's cities. Also, Siberian natives disliked the idea of the railway and refused to work. In the end, finally, men from China, Persia, and Turkey made up much of the workforce, along with Russian prisoners and exiles. The convicts exchanged work for time off their sentences and spent their nights chained to wheelbarrows. Which is kind of interesting because wheelbarrows can move, right? You could be chained to a wheelbarrow and just, pick it up and go off with it. If there was anywhere to go, I suppose. For complicated tunnels and bridges, stonemasons were drafted from Italy, which was a nation over 6,000 kilometers away. More than 15,000 people worked on the project, toiling from dawn until dusk, which in the high latitudes of Siberia lasted deep into the night. Adding to the problems was poor planning, which stalled the project at every turn. Engineers contracted to survey the ground failed to map every stream, river, and hill, and they didn't account for the meltwater that raced over the landscape in the spring. The most challenging section of the track was Lake Baikal. I've probably butchered that pronunciation. Baikal. Baikal, probably. Bounded by mountains and coated with ice in the winter. It was all but inaccessible. The original plan was to use a boat to transport the carriages. Made in England, the Baikal ferry had a reinforced steel hull and a propeller to cut through the ice. Now, according to my research, there wasn't just one ferry. There were actually two. The first was the ice-breaking ferry, built in 1897, and the second was a smaller ferry that was built a few years later. And the ferries are actually quite interesting. Let's have a look at that. So the Russian admiral and explorer Stepan Marakov designed Baikal and Angara. They were the ferries. But they were built in Newcastle upon Tyne in England by Armstrong Whitworth. They were knockdown vessels. That is, each ship was bolted together in England, every part of the ship was marked with a number, and then the ship was disassembled into many hundreds of parts and transported in kit form to Listvianka, where a shipyard was built especially to reassemble them. Their boilers, engines, and some other components were built in St. Petersburg and transported to Listvianka to be installed. Baikal had 15 boilers, 4 tunnels, and was 64 meters long. It could carry 24 railway coaches and 1 locomotive on the middle deck. So that's pretty huge. Wow. People would have problems doing that even in the modern world. Anyway, when the ferries finally arrived, they weren't up to the job. During the warmer winter months, massive storms tossed the main ferry off course and fog obscured the view. In the winter, the ice was up to 2.7 meters thick, and the propeller couldn't cut it. Bet you it was pretty good for ice skating on, though, although I imagine there wasn't much time for recreation there. And was it a success? Well, built by hand across one of the most hostile environments in the world, it was an incredible feat of human endurance. It offered new opportunities for Russia's poor, opening a corridor to a new life. Around 5 million immigrants moved to Siberia between 1891 and 1914. In the 1950s, the Soviet Union upgraded the railway, adding a second track, steel rails, new tunnels, and new bridges. And even today, they are still expanding the railway into parts of China. So on the positive side, it was considered one of our greatest human achievements. But was it really worth it? Because on the negative side, there was the economic toll and the loss of lives involved in it as well. It's hard to decide. It's hard to know, really. There's always some loss in every element of progress. It's unavoidable. So what do you think? Maybe one day you'll get out there to Russia and you'll get on that train and you'll take that trip. A lot of people have done it and documented it, and it's always fascinating. So who knows? It's out there. All you have to do is get to it. Alternatively, you can hop online and watch a couple of videos about it. Anyway, that's all for our interesting stuff for today. I hope you enjoyed this little topic that I put together for you. If you'd like something different, let me know. Drop me a comment about which subject I should study next, and I will present it to you. There you go. As always, there'll be a few questions under the video, and that is that, as they say. So wherever you are, whatever you're doing, I wish you a fantastic day. Take care.